The elderly woman was planting sunflowers until she saw a hole with something very valuable inside, and everything changes. Eleanor Harrison wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her gloved hand. The March sun beat down hard that morning, but she wouldn't give up on preparing the flower bed for the new sunflower seedlings. At 72, her hands were still steady holding the shovel, though her joints protested with every movement. "Damn root," she grumbled when the tool hit something hard for the third consecutive time. She had chosen that corner of the backyard because the soil seemed looser, but it was proving more difficult than she had imagined. She took a deep breath and dug harder, determined to remove any obstacle that would prevent her flowers from growing. The metallic sound that echoed made her stop. It wasn't wood or stone. It was different. Eleanor knelt on the damp earth, her dark pants already stained with mud. With her hands, she began to push the soil away from the mysterious object. Gradually, a rusty rectangular surface began to appear. "What are you doing there, Mrs. Eleanor?" The voice of Miller, her neighbor, made her startle. She looked over her shoulder and saw the man craning his neck over the low fence that separated the properties. "Nothing much, Miller, just preparing the soil for planting." "Looks like you found something buried there." Eleanor forced a smile and stood up, positioning herself to block his view. "It's just a big rock, nothing I can't handle." Miller didn't seem convinced, but he ended up walking away when his wife called him from inside the house. Eleanor waited until she was sure he had gone inside before returning to dig. The object was deeper than she thought. It took almost an hour to completely free it from the earth. It was an old metal box, the size of a shoebox, heavy and covered in rust. An old padlock held the lid shut. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then picked up the box and took it inside the house. In the back shed where she kept her tools, she found a hammer and a screwdriver. The padlock gave way easily, shattering with 2 precise blows. Eleanor opened the lid slowly, as if expecting something to jump out from inside. What she saw made her stagger back and lean against the wall. Golden coins shone even in the dim light, coming through the shed's small window. There were dozens of them, all old, with symbols and dates she could barely decipher. Beneath the coins, yellowed papers were carefully folded. With trembling hands, she took one of the documents. The cursive writing was faded, but still legible. It was a deed dated 1952. The name that appeared on the document made her sit down heavily on the wooden bench. Arthur Harrison, her grandfather. "It can't be," she whispered to herself. Grandpa Arthur had left the city when she was still a child, involved in some scandal her mother had never properly explained. Eleanor had always known the property where she lived had belonged to him, but she never imagined he might have left something buried there. She leafed through the other papers, receipts, contracts, correspondence, all signed by Arthur Harrison. One document caught her attention, a handwritten letter addressed to "My dear granddaughter Eleanor. If you are reading this, it is because you have finally found my little treasure. I know you must be confused, girl. When I left here in 1953, I left these coins and documents buried, waiting for the day someone in the family would find them. They are my honest savings, earned through hard work. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The truth about my departure from the city is in the papers. Take good care of what is ours. With love, your grandfather Arthur." Eleanor felt her eyes fill with tears. All her life she had heard rumors about her grandfather. Some said he had run off with money from City Hall. Others that he had gotten involved with dangerous people. Her mother always changed the subject when she asked. Now, facing that box, she realized there was much more to the story than she had imagined. The sound of an engine in front of the house brought her back to reality. Quickly, she closed the box and hid it behind a pile of fertilizer bags. She took off her dirty gloves and headed to the front door. A blue car was parked at the gate. Out of it stepped a woman around 40 years old, brown hair tied in a messy bun, wearing a yellow blouse and jeans. It was Susan, her youngest daughter. "Hi, Mom." Susan waved, walking through the small front garden. Eleanor couldn't hide her surprise. Susan had lived in New York City for 3 years and only called on birthdays and Christmas. "What are you doing here, dear?" "Can't I visit my mother?" Susan laughed, but there was something forced in the sound. "I missed you. And I was worried too. Are you okay? You seem kind of down. I'm great. I was just tending to the garden. Susan looked at her mother's dirty clothes and muddy hands. You should hire someone to do this heavy work. A woman your age. My age can still plant sunflowers, thank you. They entered the simple house. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, kitchen and bathroom. Eleanor had inherited the property from her mother, who in turn had inherited it from her father, the mysterious Grandpa Arthur. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The house could use some renovation, don't you think? Susan walked around the living room, examining the peeling walls and old furniture. It's fine the way it is. Mom, be realistic. You live alone here in the middle of nowhere. Wouldn't it be more practical to move to the city, or at least closer to civilization? Eleanor served coffee to her daughter, trying to process the conversation. Susan had never shown interest in the house before. In fact, she had always complained about country life when she was a teenager. Why all this concern now, Susan? I always worry about you. It's just... Well, I've been thinking a lot about the family lately, about our history. You know how it is. No, Eleanor didn't know, but something in her daughter's tone put her on alert. And Kevin? How is my son-in-law? Good, good. Working a lot. In fact, he mentioned something interesting. Said this area here is becoming more valuable. Lots of city people are looking for rural properties to invest in. Eleanor took a sip of coffee, watching her daughter over the rim of the cup. And nothing, I just mentioned it. But if you ever wanted to sell, you could get good money. Enough to buy an apartment in the city and still have a nice sum left over. I don't plan on selling. I know, I was just talking. Susan stirred the sugar in her coffee more vigorously than necessary. By the way, have you noticed anything strange on the property lately? Like what? I don't know. People snooping around, asking questions, or maybe finding interesting things in the backyard. Eleanor's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. What kind of things? Oh, Mom, you know. These old houses sometimes have surprises buried. Old objects, coins, that sort of thing. And where did you get that idea? Susan shrugged, but couldn't meet her mother's gaze. Just a thought. Do you know the history of the property? Who lived here before Grandma? Your great-grandmother and great-grandfather. Nothing special. And the great-grandfather? What was he like? Eleanor felt a tightness in her chest. It was the first time in decades someone had asked about Grandpa Arthur. Why so much interest in the family now, Susan? Curiosity. We never talk about these things. In fact, Eleanor realized she was right. The family never spoke about the past. She herself had avoided the subject with her children, repeating the pattern she had learned from her mother. Your great-grandfather was a hard-working man. He left town when I was a child and never came back. Why? I don't know. My mother never really explained. Susan fell silent for a few seconds, then stood up. Well, I'm going to take a walk around the property. It's been a while since I've seen everything. Susan. What, Mom? Why did you really come here? Her daughter hesitated, playing with her car keys. I already told you. Nostalgia and concern. Eleanor didn't press, but continued watching as Susan walked through the backyard. She paid special attention to the flower bed where she had found the box, now with the soil turned over and clear signs of digging. When Susan came back inside, her clothes were too clean for someone who had taken a walk around a rural property. I'll stay here tonight, okay? I brought a suitcase in the car. Eleanor nodded, but an uneasy feeling grew in her stomach. Susan had never spent a night at her mother's house since she got married. During dinner, the conversation revolved around trivial matters, but Eleanor noticed her daughter averted her gaze whenever the subject approached the property or the family. That night, lying in her bed, Eleanor listened to her daughter's footsteps through the house. Susan seemed restless, pacing back and forth. At one point she heard the back door open and close softly. She got up quietly and went to the bedroom window. In the moonlight she saw Susan walking through the backyard with a small flashlight. examining the flower bed where she had found the box. Eleanor went back to bed with her heart racing. Something was happening, and she needed to find out what. The next morning, Susan announced she would return to New York City, but would come back the following weekend, possibly with Kevin and the kids. "It's been so long since you all visited," Eleanor commented. "It's true. It was about time to reconnect family ties, don't you think?" After her daughter left, Eleanor went straight to the shed. The box was still in the same place, seemingly untouched, but she had the impression the bags of fertilizer were in a slightly different position. She took the box and brought it into the house. This time she examined each document carefully. Besides the personal letter, there were land purchase receipts, construction contracts for buildings in the city, and several official correspondences. One of them caught her attention. It was a letter from City Hall dated March 1953, thanking Arthur Harrison for the generous donation for the construction of the new elementary school. Another letter from April of the same year thanked him for the funding for the expansion of the local health clinic. Eleanor raised her eyebrows. Those documents didn't match the story of a man who had fled town in dishonesty. A loose piece of paper, newer than the others, was folded among the old documents. When she opened it, she recognized her grandfather Arthur's handwriting. The coins in this box represent 40 years of honest work. Each one was saved with sacrifice and dedication. Do not allow them to tarnish my memory with lies. The truth is in the documents. Use this money for the good of the family and the community, as I always did in life. Arthur Harrison, March 1953. She was rereading the letter when she heard the sound of a car arriving. Through the window, she saw a man in a dark suit getting out of a black vehicle. Quickly, she put the papers back in the box and hid it in the bedroom closet. She went to answer the door with her heart still pounding. "Good morning, Ma'am. My name is Anthony Brooks." The man extended a business card. "I'm a real estate broker for the area." Eleanor took the card without inviting him in. "How can I help you?" "Well, I've been getting some inquiries about properties in this area, people interested in investing in the countryside. Have you ever thought about selling?" "No." I see. But I'd like you to know I could get a very good price. This region is appreciating quickly." He was the second person in 2 days talking about the region's appreciation. Eleanor found the coincidence strange. Who is interested? Different investors. Some want land for farming, others for rural tourism. There are even those looking for properties with potential historical value. Historical? Old houses with interesting stories. Some people value that sort of thing very highly. Anthony Brooks smiled, but there was something calculated in his expression. "Do you know the history of this property well?" "Reasonably well." "Have you heard of Arthur Harrison?" Eleanor felt her blood run cold, but kept her expression neutral. "Why do you ask?" "Professional curiosity. He owned this land decades ago. A rather interesting figure in local history." "I don't know much about him." Of course. That was before your time, I imagine." Anthony consulted a paper he took from his pocket. "Some people believe he may have left mementos from the time he lived here." "What kind of mementos?" "Personal items, documents, maybe even some old coins. The older folks in town tell interesting stories about him." Eleanor realized she was being tested. Someone knew about the box, or at least suspected its existence. "And these people who tell stories, who are they?" You know how it is in a small town. Everybody knows everybody." Anthony put the paper away. "Anyway, the offer stands. If you change your mind about selling, just give me a call." He went back to his car, but before leaving, he waved to someone on the neighboring property. Eleanor looked in the direction of the wave and saw Miller at his house window. As soon as the agent left, she went to the fence that divided the properties. "Miller." The neighbor took a few seconds to appear, looking like he'd been caught red-handed. "Hi, Mrs. Eleanor, everything okay?" "Do you know that man who was here?" "What man?" "The real estate agent." "You waved to him." Miller scratched his head, clearly embarrassed. "Oh, him. He stopped by yesterday asking about you." "Asking what?" "Nothing major. Just if you lived alone, how long you'd been on the property." that sort of thing. And you answered? Just the basics. He said he was interested in buying land in the area. Eleanor studied her neighbor's face. Miller was a gossip by nature, but he wasn't a bad person. He'd probably told more than he was admitting. Anything else, he asked? Well, Miller hesitated. He wanted to know if you had family, and if there had been any strange activity on the property lately. Strange activity? Yeah. He said sometimes people find interesting things buried in old houses. Eleanor felt her stomach sink. Miller had seen her digging the day before, and apparently he had mentioned it to the agent. And what did you say? That I saw you digging in the flower bed yesterday morning, but that it was probably just normal gardening. Probably. Miller avoided her gaze. Mrs. Eleanor, did you dig something up yesterday? Why do you ask? It's just, well, after you went inside, I saw there was a hole in the ground, and the dirt was all turned over in an area bigger than would be normal for planting flowers. Eleanor realized denying it would be useless at this point. I found an old box buried. Nothing major. Probably trash from the people who lived here before. Oh, I see. Miller seemed more relaxed. And was there anything inside? Some worthless trinkets. I already threw them away. She hated lying to her neighbor but saw no alternative. Miller was a good person, but also the biggest gossip in the area. If he knew about the coins, the story would be spread all over town before nightfall. Well, if you find anything else interesting, you can let me know. Who knows, it might be worth something, right? Eleanor agreed with a nod and went back home, more worried than before. The situation was getting complicated quickly. That afternoon, while trying to focus on reading a magazine, she heard another car arriving. This time, it was a familiar vehicle, her son Stephen's pickup truck. Stephen got out of the truck accompanied by his wife Brenda and their two teenage children, Ethan and Chloe. It was rare for them to visit during the week. Hi, Mom. Stephen hugged her more effusively than usual. I've missed you. What a nice surprise, Eleanor smiled, genuinely happy to see her grandchildren. We were passing through the area and decided to stop by, explained Brenda. A lie. They lived in the neighboring town, 40 minutes away by car. There was nothing in the area that would justify them passing through. Look how you've grown. Eleanor hugged her grandchildren. Ethan, 16, was a shy and studious young man. Chloe, 14, was more outgoing and affectionate. They were the joy of Eleanor's life. Grandma, the house looks different, commented Chloe, looking around. Different how? I don't know. More tidy, or maybe cleaner. Eleanor laughed. In fact, she had spent the whole morning cleaning the house after Susan's visit. Something about her daughter's attitude had made her nervous, and she always cleaned when she was anxious. Susan was here yesterday, she mentioned. Aunt Susan? Ethan seemed surprised. She hasn't been here in years. That's right. She said she missed me. Stephen and Brenda exchanged a look that Eleanor couldn't interpret. And how was she? Asked Stephen. Fine. Talking about the area becoming more valuable, things like that. Oh, yes. There really is a movement of people from the city looking for properties in the countryside, confirmed Brenda. Have you ever thought about it? Selling the house and moving to the city? Asked Stephen, trying to sound casual. Eleanor sighed. He was the second person in 2 days suggesting she sell the house. Why does everyone want me to move away from here? It's not that, Mom. It's just that, well, you live alone, far from everything. If something were to happen... What's going to happen? Nothing, I hope. But it's worrying to know you're here alone. Eleanor looked at her son. Stephen was a good man, hard-working, but he had always been easily influenced by other people, especially by his wife and his sister. Did someone say something to you? What do you mean? Did Susan call you after coming here? Stephen hesitated before answering. She mentioned she visited you, and that she was worried. Worried about what? About the state of the house, about you living alone, and... Well, she said you were messing around in the yard digging holes. Digging holes? Eleanor felt her irritation growing. I was planting flowers. I know, Mom, but Susan got the impression that you had found something buried. And if I had found something, what would be the problem? No problem, it's just that... Stephen looked at his wife for support. If it's something valuable, maybe it would be better, I don't know, to sell it. To have some money saved for emergencies. Eleanor realized she was being cornered. First Susan with her subtle questions, then the mysterious real estate agent, now Stephen and his family, clearly guided by his sister. And what if I say I didn't find anything? We believe you, of course, Brenda said quickly. It's just that if you did, we want to help you make the best decision. The best decision for whom? The silence that followed was awkward. For you, of course, replied Stephen, but he couldn't hold his mother's gaze. Eleanor decided to change the subject. She served snacks for everyone and tried to talk about trivial things, but she could feel the tension in the air. Stephen and Brenda whispered when they thought she wasn't paying attention. It was Chloe, her beloved granddaughter, who finally broke the charade. Grandma, Daddy and Mommy were arguing in the car about an inheritance. Chloe, Stephen scolded his daughter. But it's true. You said Grandma might have found something valuable and that the family has a right to it. What kind of right? Asked Eleanor, looking directly at her son. It's not exactly like that, Mom. Then what is it like? Stephen sighed, clearly uncomfortable. It's just, if it's something related to the family history, we all have an interest, right? Not just financial, but sentimental too. What family history? The story of Grandpa Arthur. Eleanor felt her heart race. How did they know about Grandfather Arthur? What do you know about him? Not much, admitted Stephen. But Susan has been doing some research. She found some interesting things. What kind of things? Old records from City Hall, certificates, that sort of thing. It seems Grandpa was an important figure in the city before he left. And nothing. Just that. Well, he might have left valuable things when he left. Eleanor looked at her grandchildren, who were following the conversation with growing interest. Ethan was smart enough to understand there were family tensions at play. Chloe was more direct in her observations. Did Grandma really find something? Asked Chloe. Why do you think that? Because everyone is acting strange, replied Ethan, surprising everyone with his perceptiveness. Aunt Susan calls Dad talking about inheritance. You come here in the middle of the week, which you never do, and you whisper about valuable things. Eleanor smiled at her grandson. At least one person in the family was being honest about what was happening. And what do you think about all this, Ethan? I think if you found something, it's yours, not ours. Ethan, Brenda scolded her son. But it's true, Mom. Grandma has lived here her whole life, took care of the house alone. If there's something buried in the backyard, it's hers. It's not that simple, said Stephen. If it's a family inheritance, then why were you never interested in the family before? Interrupted Chloe. You only talk about Grandpa Arthur when you think there might be money involved. The 14-year-old granddaughter's observation left Stephen speechless. Eleanor decided it was time to take control of the situation. You want to know if I found something? I'll tell you the truth. Everyone leaned forward, expectant. Yes, I found a box buried in the backyard. Stephen and Brenda exchanged a triumphant look. And what was inside? Asked Brenda, trying to sound casual. Old documents and some coins. Gold coins? Stephen's voice rose an octave. Some, yes. Wow! They could be worth a fortune, exclaimed Brenda. They could, or they could be worth nothing. I don't know yet. You need someone to appraise them, suggested Stephen. I can arrange that. I've already thought of that. But first I want to better understand the story behind the box. What kind of story? Eleanor went to the bedroom and returned with some of the less compromising documents. She showed the family the receipts for donations her grandfather had made to the city. From what I'm seeing, your grandfather wasn't the man we always imagined, she said. How so? Asked Ethan. He made several donations to build the city's elementary school and health clinic. From the documents, it seems he was a generous person. But then why did he leave the city? Asked Chloe. That's the question I'm asking myself, too. Stephen took one of the documents and examined it carefully. Mom, these papers could be historically very valuable. You should donate them to the city archives. And the coins? Well, the coins are different. They could be worth a lot of money. And what do you all think I should do with them? Sell them and split the money among the family, said Brenda without hesitation. Why? Because it's family inheritance. We are all descendants of your grandfather. I am also his descendant, and I found the coins on my property. But, Mom, Stephen tried to argue. No, Stephen. Let me explain something to you all. Eleanor stood up and faced her son and daughter-in-law. For 72 years I took care of this house alone. I paid taxes, made repairs, kept everything running. You've barely set foot here in the last 10 years. Now, because there might be money involved, you show up talking about family rights? That's not it, Grandma, said Chloe, visibly embarrassed. I know that's not your intention, dear, but that is what's happening. Ethan stood up and approached his grandmother. Grandma, can I see the coins? Eleanor hesitated, then decided it was fine to show her grandchildren. Come with me. She led them to the bedroom and took the box out of the closet. When she opened it, everyone's eyes widened. Wow, whispered Ethan. There are so many. And old, added Chloe. Look at these dates. This one is from 1889. They could be worth a fortune, murmured Brenda. Or they could be worth almost nothing, countered Eleanor. Old coins aren't necessarily valuable. You need to see a specialist, insisted Stephen. I know, but first I want to find out more about your grandfather's story. Why did he hide these coins? Why did he leave the city? Does that matter? Asked Brenda. What matters is the coin's value. It matters to me. Chloe picked up one of the documents and tried to decipher the cursive handwriting. Grandma, here it says that your great-grandfather also donated money to build a library. Really? Yes, and to an orphanage. Wow, he donated a lot of money. So he was rich? Asked Ethan. It seems so, and very generous too. Stephen was flipping through other papers when he made an exclamation. Mom, look at this. He showed an official document with the City Hall letterhead. It's a notification from 1953. They are accusing your grandfather of... He stopped reading. Of what? Of mismanaging public funds. Eleanor took the document from her son's hands. It was a formal notification accusing Arthur Harrison of misusing funds intended for public works. So that's it, she murmured. That's why he left the city. But if he was so generous, how could he have stolen public money? Asked Chloe. Maybe the accusations were false, suggested Ethan. Or maybe he did it to make up for something he had done wrong, pondered Stephen. Eleanor picked up another document. It was a handwritten letter addressed to the mayor at the time. Mr. Mayor, I write this letter to clarify that I never misappropriated public funds. All the works I financed were paid for with my own resources, the fruit of my honest work in local commerce. The accusations against me are baseless and motivated by political envy. However, to avoid further embarrassment for my family and the municipal administration, I choose to withdraw from the city's public life. Arthur Harrison, March 1953. He denied the accusations, said Eleanor after reading the letter aloud. Of course he denied it. Everyone denies it when they're caught, commented Brenda. But look at these receipts, Ethan pointed to other papers. His company's name is on all of them. Harrison & Co. General Trading, he had his own business. And by the volume of donations, the business was doing very well, added Chloe. Eleanor was beginning to form a new image of her grandfather. Perhaps he really was innocent of the accusations. You know what I'm going to do, she said, closing the box. I'm going to investigate this story properly before deciding anything about the coins. Mother, you don't need to complicate yourself with this, argued Stephen. It's better to just sell everything and be done with it. Better for you, you mean? That's not it. Yes, it is, Stephen, and you know what? You've disappointed me today. The silence that followed was heavy. You came here not because you miss me, but because you think I found money. You treat me as if I were incapable of making my own decisions. And on top of that, you want to split something you don't even know has value. Grandma, Amanda tried to speak. No, dear. Let me finish. Eleanor looked at each of them. I will decide what to do with these coins when I have all the information I need, and when I decide, the decision will be mine. And if you decide to keep everything for yourself? Asked Brenda, unable to hide her irritation. That is my right. Even though it's a family inheritance. Brenda, you weren't even part of the family when Grandpa Arthur was alive. In fact, I didn't even really know him. So don't come talking about family rights. Brenda turned red but didn't argue back. Mother, you're being unfair, said Stephen. We're worried about you. Worried now. Where was that worry for the last 3 years? That's not fair. What's not fair is you showing up here thinking you have a right to something I found on my property. Ethan approached his grandmother again. Grandma, I think you're right. If you found the coins here, they're yours. Ethan, stay out of this, his father reprimanded. Why not? Everyone else is getting involved. Because you're a child. I'm 16, and I have eyes to see what's happening. Chloe joined her brother. I agree with Grandma too. You're being greedy. Stephen looked at his children with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Let's go. You two are going to learn about respecting your parents. Respect is earned, Dad, replied Ethan, not demanded. The phrase left Stephen even more irritated. Mother, when you want to talk about this more rationally, just call. There's nothing irrational about wanting to investigate the family history before making an important decision. There is, when it's a fortune in gold coins. After Stephen and the family left, Eleanor was alone with her thoughts. The visit had made it clear that her discovery would not remain a secret for long. She picked up the phone and called Mrs. Dorothy, the oldest neighbor in the area. Dorothy, it's Eleanor. Hi, dear. How are you? Fine. Dorothy, can I ask you about the past? Of course. What do you want to know? Do you remember my grandfather, Arthur Harrison? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yes, I do. Why do you ask? What kind of person was he? Oh, Eleanor, your grandfather was a very good man. He helped a lot of people in town. And why did he leave here? Because of the false accusations. False? Completely false. Your grandfather never stole a penny from anyone. Quite the opposite. He gave away more than he could afford. Then why did people believe the accusations? Politics, my dear. Envy too. Your grandfather was too prosperous for a small town. That bothered some important people. What kind of people? The mayor at the time, some councilmen. They wanted to get rid of his influence in town. Influence? Your grandfather was very respected. When he supported a candidate, that candidate usually won. When he was against some decision from City Hall, the people followed him. Eleanor absorbed this information with growing interest. Dorothy, do you think he knew the accusations were coming? I'm sure of it. He told me, a few days before he left, that he knew they were plotting against him, but that he wouldn't stay to see his family humiliated. Did he say anything about leave something behind? Leave how? I don't know. Some memento, something hidden. Not that I remember. Why do you ask? Eleanor hesitated. Mrs. Dorothy was trustworthy, but the fewer people who knew about the box, the better. Just curious, I've been finding some old things around the house. What kind of things? Papers, old documents. Oh, that must be interesting. Your grandfather kept everything. He was very organized. After hanging up, Eleanor felt more at ease about her grandfather's character, but also more worried about her own situation. If Mrs. Dorothy was right and Arthur Harrison had truly been the victim of a political frame-up, the coins in the box were legitimate, but that also meant they could be worth much more than she had imagined. The next morning, she woke up early and went for a walk through the sunflower field. The flowers hadn't bloomed yet, but the stalks were already tall and strong. It was one of her morning rituals, walking among the plants and planning the day. That's when she noticed a car parked on the dirt road that passed in front of her property. It was the same black vehicle belonging to the broker Anthony Brooks. It had been parked long enough for the windows to fog up. Eleanor couldn't see if anyone was inside, but the car was definitely not there by chance. She went back inside and picked up the phone. Stephen? Hi, Mom. Any problems? There's a strange man watching my house. What do you mean? A broker who showed up here yesterday. Now he's parked on the road just watching. Are you sure? Yes, and I'm starting to get worried. Do you want me to come over? Eleanor hesitated. Part of her wanted her son's company, but another part was still hurt by his attitude the day before. I don't know. Maybe it's better to call the police. Mom, don't overreact. If he's a broker, he's probably just waiting for a better time to talk to you. At 7 in the morning? Well, maybe not, but calling the police might be too much. Then what do you suggest? I'll swing by in a little while. If he's still there, I'll talk to him. Eleanor accepted the suggestion but kept watching from the window. The car remained parked for another hour, then left without anyone getting out. When Stephen arrived, the broker was gone. Are you sure it was the same man? He asked. Yes, same car, same spot where he parked yesterday. Well, if he comes back, I'll talk to him. Stephen seemed more conciliatory than the day before. Eleanor realized he had probably thought over their conversation. Mom, about yesterday. What? I thought a lot about what you said, and I think you're right. About what? About us being greedy. You found the coins, you decide what to do with them. Eleanor studied her son's face. He seemed sincere. And Brenda, does she agree? Brenda? Well, she's a little upset, but she'll accept whatever you decide. And Susan? Susan is another problem. How so? She called last night. She was furious because I told her you found the coins. Furious why? Because she wanted us not to tell you anything we knew about the box. How did you know about the box? Stephen looked uncomfortable. Susan researched Grandpa Arthur online, found some references to a hidden treasure in local stories. What kind of stories? Old rumors. People saying Grandpa had money hidden somewhere. Susan became convinced it was here on the property. And that's why she came here to investigate? Yes, she wanted to find out if the rumors were true before involving the rest of the family. Eleanor felt a pang of hurt. Her daughter had come here with ulterior motives, not out of missing her or concern. And what was your plan? Susan wanted us to convince you to look for the coins together. As a family adventure. Then when we found it, we'd split it among everyone. But I had already found it when she arrived here. Yes, and she noticed from the signs in the backyard. That's why she changed her strategy. What strategy? To make you feel guilty for hiding something from the family. Eleanor shook her head, disappointed. And you agree with that? No. That's why I'm here, to apologize and to warn you about Susan. Warn me about what? She's coming here today with her husband and 2 lawyers. Lawyers? Yes. She wants to contest the possession of the coins in court. Eleanor felt her legs go weak and sat down on the kitchen chair. On what grounds? She's going to claim the coins are uninventoried family inheritance and that you are trying to misappropriate them. But I found them on my property. I know, Mom, but Susan hired lawyers who specialize in inheritance law. They must have found some legal loophole. Eleanor felt surrounded on all sides. The family turning against her, strangers lurking around her house, lawyers being hired. Dear Stephen, what do you think I should do? Hire a lawyer too, and quickly. I don't have the money for that. I'll lend it to you. Why? I thought you wanted the coins too. Stephen sat down next to his mother. Mom, I do want the coins to be divided among the family, but not this way, not against your will. If you want to divide them of your own free will, great. If you don't, that's your right too. And if I decide to keep everything, it's your decision. Even if it means a fortune? Even then. Eleanor looked at her son with renewed affection. Perhaps there was hope for the family after all. Do you have a lawyer to suggest? I do, Attorney Vance. He's good and not expensive. Can you call him? I can, but first you need to decide one thing. What? Are you going to tell him about all the coins or hide some? The question took Eleanor by surprise. Why do you ask that? Because if Susan gets a court order, she could force you to hand everything over for court deposit. But if there are only a few known coins, are you suggesting I hide part of the treasure? I'm suggesting you protect your interests. Eleanor considered the suggestion. It was tempting, but also dishonest. No. I'll tell the lawyer everything. If the coins are rightfully mine, I don't need to hide anything. And if they're not, then I'll accept the court's decision. Stephen nodded, seeming respectful of his mother's integrity. Then I'll call Attorney Vance right now. While her son spoke on the phone, Eleanor went to the bedroom and got the box. She counted the coins again. There were 43 from different periods and sizes. Some looked very old, others more recent. If each was worth at least $1,000, she was talking about more than $40,000. But if they were rare coins, the value could be much higher. $40,000 was more money than she had ever seen together in her entire life. "Attorney Vance can see you this afternoon," Stephen announced. 2:00. "Should I bring the whole box?" He suggested bringing just a few representative coins and all the documents for a first consultation. "And Susan, when is she arriving?" "I'm not sure, but probably after lunch." "Then I have little time." Eleanor selected 5 coins from different periods and separated the most important documents. She stored the rest of the box in a safer place, inside a plastic bag, at the bottom of the laundry tub, covered by a pile of old towels. At 2:00 sharp, she was in Attorney Vance's office, a middle-aged man with small glasses and a reassuring smile. "You are in a delicate situation," he said after examining the documents, "but not an impossible one to resolve. Is my daughter right? Can coins be considered family inheritance? It depends. If we can prove your grandfather hid them with the specific intention that you would find them, they are yours. If we cannot prove that, they might be considered abandoned property, which makes them the property of whoever found them. In this case, also you. And if we cannot prove either, then it could get complicated. But let's work with what we have." He flipped through the papers again. "This handwritten letter is very important. Your grandfather clearly left the coins to be found by the family, but he doesn't specify they are for me. No, but you are the one living on the property where they were found. That counts for a lot. Attorney Vance, how long can a dispute like this take? Months, maybe years. It depends on how many appeals are filed. And the costs? For you, not much. I'll work on a contingency fee basis. If we win, I get a percentage. If we lose, I only get the basic costs." "What percentage?" 20% of the value we managed to keep for you." Eleanor did the math in her head. If the coins were worth $40,000, she would pay $8,000 to the lawyer. Still, she would walk away with $32,000, far more than she ever imagined having. "Attorney Vance, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you think I'm being greedy? My children think I should share the coins with them. Mrs. Eleanor, the law exists to protect rights. If you have a right to the coins, there is nothing greedy about exercising that right. Now, if you want to share them for family reasons, that is a personal decision of yours. And if I decide to share after we win the case, you can do that whenever you want." Eleanor felt calmer as she left the lawyer's office. At least now she had legal representation and a plan of action. When she got home at 4 in the afternoon, 2 cars were parked in front of the gate. One was Susan's, the other she didn't recognize. She took a deep breath and prepared for the confrontation. Susan was in the living room with her husband, Kevin, and a man in a suit who introduced himself as Attorney Sterling. "Mother, we need to talk," said Susan without preamble. "About what?" "About the coins you found." "What about them?" Attorney Sterling stepped forward. "Mrs. Eleanor, my name is Carlos Sterling. I represent your daughter in matters related to family succession. I'm here to try and resolve this situation amicably." "What situation?" "The improper appropriation of property that belonged to Arthur Harrison. I haven't appropriated anything improperly. I found the coins buried on my property." "That doesn't automatically make them yours," explained the lawyer. "If these assets were hidden by your grandfather, they are part of his uninventoried estate. And what's the practical difference? The difference is they must be divided among all the legal heirs of Arthur Harrison." "Who are those heirs?" "You and your children." Eleanor looked at Susan, who avoided her gaze. "And if I don't agree?" "Then we will have to settle this in court," replied Attorney Sterling. "I've already hired a lawyer too." The information seemed to surprise Susan. "Who?" "Attorney Vance." "He's good," admitted Attorney Sterling. "That makes things more professional." "Attorney Sterling, may I ask a question? How did you know I had found something?" The lawyer looked at Susan, who finally raised her eyes to her mother. "I knew about the rumors," she said. "And when I came here and saw the signs in the backyard, I confirmed my suspicions. So you already knew about the possibility of buried coins even before I found them. We knew the rumors. We didn't know if they were true." "And why didn't you tell me?" "Because—" Susan hesitated. "Because we didn't want to raise false hopes. Or because they wanted to control the situation." "That's not it, Mother." "Then what is it?" Attorney Sterling intervened again. "Mrs. Eleanor, let's not argue about motivations. Let's focus on the legal facts. You found property that belonged to a deceased family member. That property must be inventoried and divided according to the law. And if my lawyer disagrees, then we'll let the courts decide." "Perfectly." There was a moment of silent tension in the room. "Mother," said Susan, "don't you even want to try to resolve this within the family?" "Susan, you destroyed any chance of a family resolution when you hired lawyers and came here to threaten me." "We're not threatening." "No? Then what is this? An afternoon tea?" Kevin, who had remained silent until then, decided to speak. "Mrs. Eleanor, with all due respect, we think you're being a bit stubborn." "Stubborn?" "Yes. If the coins are worth what we suspect, there's enough money for everyone to be well off. Why not share?" "Kevin, with all due respect, you are not family. This has nothing to do with you. I've been married to Susan for 15 years. So of course it has to do with me. Not when it comes to my family's inheritance." Attorney Sterling noticed the conversation was deteriorating. "Well, I think we've stated our positions. I'll speak with Attorney Vance in the coming days to try to reach an agreement. You can talk all you want, but I won't give up my rights." "What rights?" exploded Susan. "You have no more rights to those coins than I or Stephen do." "Yes, I do. I found them. I live here. And from what I discovered about your great-grandfather, he was an honest man who was wronged." "That changes nothing legally," argued Attorney Sterling. "We'll see." After they left, Eleanor felt emotionally exhausted. The family was falling apart over some coins she didn't even know had real value. She called Stephen. "How did it go with Susan?" "Terrible. She brought a lawyer and everything." "I can imagine. She called me before going there. She was furious." "Why didn't you go with her?" "Because I don't agree with her methods." "Even disagreeing with the methods, do you agree with the goal?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mother, can I be honest?" "I'd prefer you were." "Yes, I would like to receive a portion of the coins, but not at any cost. If you have a legal right to them, they are yours. And if the judge decides they should be divided, then I'll accept the court's decision. And if I decide to share voluntarily, I would be very grateful, but it's your decision." Eleanor felt better after talking to Stephen. At least one of her children still maintained some decency in the middle of that mess. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. That night she could barely sleep. Every noise outside made her jump out of bed to look out the window. She was afraid someone might try to break into her house looking for the coins. The next morning, she decided to take an extreme measure. She took the box out of the laundry tub and took it to the bank. "I want to rent a safe deposit box," she told the manager. "No problem, Mrs. Eleanor. What will you be storing?" "Important documents." The manager asked no further questions. An hour later, the box was secure in the bank vault, safe from any attempt at theft or search and seizure. Returning home, she found Miller waiting for her at the gate. "Mrs. Eleanor, I need to speak with you." "What is it, Miller?" "That broker came back last night." "What time?" "Around 10. He was parked on the road for almost 2 hours." "Doing what?" "Just watching, but this time he wasn't alone." "What do you mean?" "There was another man with him, and they were using binoculars." Eleanor felt a chill in her stomach. "Binoculars?" "Yes. I saw when the street light hit the glass." They were watching her house. "Miller, do you think I should call the police?" "I think so. This isn't normal." Eleanor called the local police station and filed a report about suspicious behavior from strangers watching her property. The police chief promised to send a patrol car to make rounds in the area. In the afternoon, Attorney Vance called with news. "Mrs. Eleanor, your daughter's lawyer has filed a probate action." "Already?" "Yes. And also requested an injunction to prevent you from selling or transferring the coins." "Can they do that?" "They can try, but I will contest it." "Do you still have the coins?" "Yes, in a safe place." "Great. Don't move them from there without notifying me." "Attorney Vance, how long can this process take?" "Months, but I will try to speed it up by requesting preferential treatment due to the petitioner's age." "Petitioner? You. Since you are elderly, you are entitled to expedited proceedings." It was strange to be officially considered elderly, but Eleanor would accept any legal advantage available. A week later, the situation became even more complicated. She was watering the sunflowers when she saw a police car arriving. 2 officers got out and approached the gate. "Mrs. Eleanor Harrison?" "That's me. We have a search and seizure warrant." Eleanor felt the world spinning around her. Search and seizure of what? Assets related to the estate of Arthur Harrison. The judge had partially granted Susan's request. "Can I call my lawyer?" "You can, but we will have to execute the warrant regardless." Eleanor called Attorney Vance, who arrived half an hour later, visibly worried. "Mrs. Eleanor, where are the coins?" "In a safe place." "They are not here?" "No." "Then let them search. They won't find anything." The police officers searched the entire house, including the shed and the backyard. Obviously, they found nothing. "Are you sure there is nothing related to the estate of Arthur Harrison on this property?" asked one of the officers. "I'm sure." It was technically true. The coins were not on the property. After the police left, Attorney Vance warned her, "Mrs. Eleanor, you need to be very careful. If they discover you hid the coins, you could be charged with concealment of assets." "But I'm not concealing them. They are in a safe place while the court decides who they belong to. Even so, it's risky. Perhaps it would be better to declare where they are. And if the judge orders them to be placed in court custody, then we will have to comply." Eleanor weighed her options. Hiding the coins was risky, but handing them over to court custody meant losing them temporarily, perhaps for years. "Attorney Vance, if I hand the coins over to court custody, can I continue living here?" "Of course. That has nothing to do with the ownership of the house." "And if I win the case, do I get the coins back?" "Yes, with monetary correction. And if I lose, then they are divided as determined by the judgment." "All right. I will tell where the coins are." The next morning, she went to the courthouse accompanied by Attorney Vance and declared that the coins were in the bank's safe deposit box. The judge ordered them to be transferred to court custody. It was painful to hand the box over to the court officer, but Eleanor knew it was the right thing to do. "At least now you can sleep peacefully," said Attorney Vance. "No one else will bother trying to steal the coins." He was right. In the following days, there were no more strange cars watching the house. Miller also confirmed that the mysterious men had disappeared, but the external peace did not reflect Eleanor's emotional turmoil. The family was divided, with Susan avoiding any contact and Stephen trying to play the role of mediator. "Mom, don't you want to try to talk to Susan?" he suggested during a visit. "What for, so she can accuse me of something else? She regrets how she handled the situation." "Does she regret it, or is she worried she might lose the case?" "A bit of both, I think. Stephen, your sister hurt me deeply, not just because of the money, but because of the distrust, because of the way she treated me." "I know, but sometimes people do the wrong thing when money is involved." "That's no excuse." "It isn't, but it can be an explanation." Eleanor considered her son's words. Perhaps Susan really was sorry, but the wounds were still too fresh to heal. 2 weeks after the coins were seized by court order, she received an unexpected visit. It was Mrs. Dorothy, her oldest neighbor. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you about something important." "What is it, Dorothy?" "It's about your grandfather and those coins." Eleanor felt her heart race. "What about them?" "I knew about them." "You knew?" "Your grandfather told me where he had hidden them before he left the city." The revelation left Eleanor speechless. "Why did you never tell me?" Because he made me promise I would only tell if someone in the family found them by chance. And you did. Dorothy, this is very important. Can you testify in the case? I can, and I have one more thing to show you. Mrs. Dorothy took a yellowed envelope from her purse. Your grandfather gave me this before he left. He said to give it to you when the time came. With trembling hands, Eleanor opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. My dear granddaughter Eleanor, if you are reading this letter, it means you have found my little treasure, and that Mrs. Dorothy has kept her promise to safeguard it. These coins represent my entire life of honest work. I never stole a penny from anyone, despite the accusations against me. I leave this money specifically to you, not because you are more special than your siblings, who are not yet born as I write this, but because you have always shown the kind heart of your mother and the determination of our family. Use this money wisely. Do not let it destroy your family, but also do not let others take advantage of your kindness. You will know the right thing to do when the time comes. With all my love, your grandfather. Arthur Harrison, March 1953. P.S. There are more coins buried in the same spot. Dig deeper. Eleanor read the letter 3 times before she could speak. Dorothy, this letter changes everything. My grandfather left the coins specifically to me. I know. And there's one more thing. What? The part about digging deeper. When you found the first box, I got curious. I went there last night and dug a little more. And? I found another box, smaller but with more coins. And some jewelry too. Eleanor nearly fainted. Where is that box? At my house. I thought it better to keep it safe until we talked. Dorothy, do you realize what this means? If there are more coins, the total value could be a fortune. Yes, I realize. The 2 women looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. Eleanor, what are you going to do? I'll turn it over to the court as well. It's the right thing to do. What if it's worth much more money? It doesn't matter. If the coins are rightfully mine, I get them back. If they're not, at least I acted correctly. Mrs. Dorothy smiled. Your grandfather chose the right person to leave his treasure to. The next day, accompanied by Attorney Vance and Mrs. Dorothy, Eleanor returned to the courthouse. The new box was submitted for court deposit, along with the letter specifying its intended recipient. The letter caused a stir in the case. Attorney Sterling, Susan's lawyer, argued that the document could be forged. Attorney Vance requested a handwriting analysis to prove its authenticity. While waiting for the analysis results, Eleanor tried to rebuild her relationship with her children. Stephen continued to visit regularly, but Susan kept her distance. It was Ethan, her grandson, who finally broke the impasse. Grandma, can I say something? Of course, dear. I spoke with Aunt Susan. And? She's ashamed. She knows she did wrong, but she can't bring herself to apologize. Why? Pride, and fear that you won't forgive her. And you? What do you think? I think family is more important than money. The simplicity of her grandson's observation touched Eleanor's heart. You're right, Ethan. But sometimes people do things that hurt a lot. I know, but everyone makes mistakes, right? The important thing is to recognize the mistake. And if your Aunt Susan recognized the mistake, do you think I should forgive her? I do, because you always taught that forgiving is good for the person who forgives, not just for the one who is forgiven. That night, Eleanor reflected on her grandson's words. Perhaps it was time to take the first step toward family reconciliation. She called Susan. Hello? Susan, it's me. Mom. The surprise was evident in her daughter's voice. Can we talk? Of course. Do you want me to come over? I'd rather we talk on the phone first. Okay. There was a moment of awkward silence. Mum, I want to apologize. For what? For everything. For the way I acted. For the distrust. For hiring a lawyer. I was wrong. You certainly were. I know. And I'm sorry. Susan, you hurt me deeply. Not just because of the money, but because you doubted me. I didn't doubt you. I doubted the situation. It's the same thing. No, Mom. I always knew you were an honest person. But when there's a lot of money involved, people get paranoid. And now, are you still paranoid? No. Now I just want our family to go back to normal. Even if that means I keep all the coins, even then. If the court decides they're yours, they're yours. And if you decide to share, it will be of your own free will, not under pressure. Eleanor felt a weight lift from her shoulders. All right, Susan, I accept your apology. Thank you, Mum. You have no idea how relieved I feel. And the lawsuit? I'll ask my lawyer to drop the case. That's not necessary. Let the court decide. At least that way it will be clear to everyone what the truth is. Are you sure? I am. And regardless of the outcome, our family will stay united. Promise? I promise. 3 months later, the results of the handwriting analysis arrived. Great-grandfather Arthur's letter was authentic, without a shadow of a doubt. Based on the letter and Mrs. Dorothy's testimony, the judge ruled that the coins belonged entirely to Eleanor, in accordance with the expressed will of Arthur Harrison. The total value of the 2 boxes, after appraisal by experts, was estimated at $120,000. It was more money than Eleanor had ever dreamed of having. "And now, Mom?" asked Stephen when she received the coins back. "What are you going to do with all that money?" Eleanor smiled. "I'm going to follow my grandfather's example." "How so?" "He used his money to help the community. I'll do the same thing. You're going to donate it all. Not all, but a significant part." "To whom?" "To restore the school my grandfather helped build, to renovate the health clinic, to create a public library in his name." "And the rest?" "The rest I will divide among you and keep a portion for my old age." Susan, who was present for the conversation, began to cry. "Mom, you don't need to share anything with us. We don't deserve it." "Yes, you do. You're my children, and that's what family is for. After everything we did, exactly because of that, to show that a mother's love is stronger than any disagreement." A month later, the story spread through the city. The local newspapers published stories about the woman who found a treasure and changed the community. The school renovation was completed in 6 months. The health clinic got new equipment. The Arthur Harrison Public Library was inaugurated with a big celebration. On the day of the public library's inauguration, Eleanor gave an emotional speech. "My grandfather was wronged for decades. Today his name is finally honored as it deserves. He always believed that money only has value when it is used to do good. I hope I am honoring his memory." In the audience, her entire family was present. Susan and Stephen with their respective spouses and children, Mrs. Dorothy, proud as if she were a relative, Attorney Vance, who had become a close friend. Even Miller was there, finally having a real story to tell instead of gossiping about assumptions. "Grandma," said Chloe after the ceremony, "you did the right thing." "Why?" "Because you turned something that could have destroyed our family into something that brought us even closer together. And taught everyone that money isn't everything," added Ethan, "but that when it's used right, it can do a lot of good." Months later, during a quiet morning in the sunflower field, Eleanor reflected on everything that had happened. The flowers were magnificent, tall and golden, swaying gently in the breeze. She still lived in the same house, but now with improvements that made life more comfortable. She had a new car, which Stephen had taught her to drive again after years without practice. The remaining money was safely kept in the bank, ensuring her financial security for the rest of her life. But more important than that was the certainty that she had made the right decisions. "Thank you, Grandpa Arthur," she said aloud, looking at the flower bed where she had found the first box. "You chose well where to hide your treasure." A gentle breeze swayed the sunflowers, as if it were a response from her grandfather. Eleanor smiled and continued her morning walk, knowing she had discovered something far more valuable than gold coins. She had rediscovered the true value of family and community. The mysterious broker, Anthony Brooks, never appeared again. Miller later discovered he wasn't a real broker, but a scammer who took advantage of rumors about hidden treasures to deceive elderly people. Eleanor's story became a legend in the region. Other people began digging up their backyards in search of family treasures, but never found anything except roots and stones. "Perhaps," she would say to those who asked about the secret, The real treasure isn't what we find buried, but what we build with our own hands and heart. And as her sunflowers grew more beautiful each season, Eleanor knew she had planted much more than flowers in her land. She had planted hope, family unity, and a legacy of generosity that would last long beyond her own life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, years passed, and Eleanor's story became part of local folklore. Children at the elementary school that had been renovated with Grandpa Arthur's coins learned about honesty and generosity through her story. The library bearing the name of Arthur Harrison became the cultural center of the town, where people of all ages gathered not only to read, but to exchange stories and knowledge. Eleanor, now 78 years old, continued living in her house in the sunflower field. Her health was good, and she kept up the routine of walking among the flowers every morning. The family had grown stronger through the difficulties. Susan visited her mother regularly, and the two had developed a closer and more honest relationship than they ever had before. Stephen continued to be the caring son he always was, but now with the security that the family conflicts had been overcome. The grandchildren, Ethan and Chloe, now young adults, often brought friends to meet the treasure grandma, as she had become known at the university they attended. "Grandma," said Ethan during a Sunday visit, "have you ever regretted donating so much money?" "Never," answered Eleanor without hesitation. "Do you know why?" "Why?" "Because the money I donated turned into things that will last much longer than I will. The school will educate children for generations. The health clinic will save lives. The public library will spread knowledge. And if you had kept it all for yourself? Only I would have become rich. The way I did it, the entire city became richer." Chloe, who was now studying journalism, was always interested in the details of the family history. "Grandma, do you think great-grandfather Arthur imagined the coins would cause so much trouble in the family?" "I think he knew it would be a test," replied Eleanor. "That's why he left that letter specifying they were for me. He wanted to see if I would make the right choices." "And did you?" "I hope so. At least I tried to follow his example of using money to do good." "Do you think there are still more treasures hidden out there?" Eleanor smiled. "Perhaps, but not the kind you find by digging in the ground." "What do you mean?" "The real treasures are the people we love, the memories we build, the good we do for others. Those things are worth much more than any gold coin." In the following years, Eleanor became a kind of informal counselor for the community. People came to seek her out when they had family conflicts or ethical dilemmas. Her story had become an example of how to solve problems with wisdom and generosity. "Mrs. Eleanor," said a younger neighbor one day, "my husband wants us to move to the city to earn more money. But I like living here. What would you do in my place?" "First, I would talk honestly with my husband about what really matters to our family," answered Eleanor. "Money is important, but it's not everything. Sometimes a simpler life is worth more than a fat bank account. And if he doesn't agree, then you need to find a middle ground. Maybe he can work in the city but continue living here. Or perhaps you can save enough to return in a few years. Do you think there's always a solution to problems? There's always at least an attempt at a solution. The important thing is to keep the family united and be honest about what you want from life." These conversations always reminded Eleanor of her own journey. She had faced the temptation of greed, the challenge of keeping the family united, and the responsibility of using money wisely. One autumn afternoon, as she watched her sunflowers prepare for the end of the season, she received an unexpected visit. It was a young man, about 30 years old, accompanied by a woman of the same age and 2 small children. "Mrs. Eleanor," asked the man, "my name is John Philip Harrison. I am the great-grandson of Arthur Harrison." Eleanor nearly fell out of the chair where she was sitting. "Great-grandson?" "Yes, my grandfather was your father's brother. He moved to another state when he was young, and we lost contact with the family here." "How did you find me?" "Through the newspapers that talked about the discovery of the coins and the school renovation. When I saw the name Arthur Harrison, I decided to investigate." The woman introduced herself as John Philip's wife, and the children were their sons. They had traveled over 300 miles to meet the lost family. "Did you know about the coins?" asked Eleanor. "No, but my grandfather always told stories about a wealthy brother who had been wronged. He said that one day the truth would be known." And it was. Yes, it was. And from what we read in the papers, you did exactly what my grandfather would have said to do. You used the money to honor the family's memory. Eleanor invited the new relatives inside and served coffee. The children, curious, went out to explore the sunflower field while the adults talked. "Mrs. Eleanor," said John Philip, "we want you to know we didn't come here for money." "No, no, we came for family." My grandfather always regretted losing touch with the relatives from here, and I always thought my father was an only child. He wasn't. My grandfather was younger than yours. His name was Walter Harrison. Walter, Eleanor repeated the name thoughtfully. My mother sometimes spoke of an Uncle Walter, but I thought he was just an acquaintance. He was my grandfather. They were very close as children. The discovery of new relatives brought an unexpected joy to Eleanor. All her life, she had felt part of a small family. Now she discovered there were cousins, nephews and nieces and other relatives scattered across the country. "You can stay here at the house," she offered. "We don't want to impose." "Impose? Your family?" John Philip and his family stayed at Eleanor's house for a week. During that time, they exchanged family stories, visited the places that had been renovated with the money from the coins, and strengthened bonds that had been lost for decades. "Uncle Arthur would be so proud to see what you've done," said John Philip on the day of their departure. "He always said the Harrison family had a generous heart. And you, will you come back?" "Yes, we will. We might even move here. The children loved life in the country. You will be most welcome." After the new relatives left, Eleanor felt even more complete. Not only had she restored her grandfather Arthur's name and used his legacy for the good of the community, but she had also rediscovered family branches that enriched her life. The years continued to pass, and Eleanor maintained her healthy routine and her active participation in the community. The renovation of the school with the money from the coins had resulted in a significant improvement in local education. Several children from the region received scholarships to universities thanks to the better preparation they received. The renovated health clinic had significantly reduced the need for people to travel to larger cities for medical care. This had saved lives and improved the quality of life for the entire region. The Arthur Harrison Library had become a center of culture and knowledge that attracted visitors from neighboring towns. Adult literacy programs, reading groups, and educational activities for children took place regularly in the space. "Grandma," said Chloe during a visit, "have you ever stopped to calculate how many people were helped by what you did?" "Not directly. Why?" "Journalistic curiosity. I did some research for a college paper." "And?" "Just at the school, over 500 children have already benefited from the renovation. At the health clinic, thousands more appointments were possible because of the new equipment. At the library, hundreds of people learned to read through the literacy programs." "Impressive." "Yeah. And that's not counting the indirect effect. Families that didn't have to move to bigger cities, jobs that were created, knowledge that was spread. Your great-grandfather would be proud." "I'm sure he would." On the morning of her 80th birthday, Eleanor woke up early as always and went for a walk in the sunflower field. The flowers were especially beautiful that year, tall and vibrant, facing the rising sun. She stopped at the spot where she had found the first box of coins, now marked by a small bronze plaque that Stephen had commissioned. Here began a new story for our family and our community. Arthur P. Harrison, 1952. "Good morning, Grandpa Arthur," she said as she did every morning. "Thank you for choosing me to care for your legacy." A gentle breeze made the sunflowers sway, and Eleanor smiled. At 80 years old, she had discovered that true wealth was not in the coins she had found buried, but in the relationships she had cultivated, the community she had helped improve, and the legacy of kindness she would leave for future generations. When she returned home, she found the whole family waiting for her with a birthday cake and a special surprise. John Philip and his family had permanently moved to the area, and were building a house near hers. "Now you'll never be alone again, Grandma," said Ethan. "I was never alone," replied Eleanor, looking at all the beloved faces around her. "I've always had you, and I've always been sure I was making the right choices." "And you certainly did," said Susan, hugging her mother affectionately. "You taught all of us that family is worth more than money, but that when money is used wisely, it can strengthen family bonds even more. And that honesty and generosity are treasures that never depreciate," added Stephen. That night, after everyone had left, Eleanor sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars. In her mind, she reviewed the entire journey that had begun with a simple morning planting sunflowers. She had faced greed, overcome family conflicts, resisted external pressures, and made difficult decisions. But in the end, she had discovered that the real treasure was not in Grandpa Arthur's gold coins. The real treasure was in the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives, to honor the memory of a wronged ancestor, and to leave a legacy that would endure long beyond her own existence. When she went up to sleep that night, Eleanor looked out the bedroom window one last time. The field of sunflowers was bathed in moonlight, the flowers asleep until the next dawn. "Good night, Grandpa Arthur," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that planting sunflowers is like planting hope. If you take good care of them, they always grow facing the light." And so, in a small town in the Brazilian countryside, the story of a woman who found a buried treasure became the story of an entire community that discovered the wealth of generosity, family unity, and the transformative power of always making the right choice, even when it is not the easiest one. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story of Eleanor and her discovery in the sunflower field. Would you make the same choices she did? How would you act if you found a buried treasure? Leave your honest opinion in the comments and share where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart as it touched ours, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the values of family, honesty, and generosity.